Hey there, my name is Antonio and welcome to this comprehensive tutorial where we'll embark on an exciting journey to create a state-of-the-art real-time messenger clone using some of the most powerful and cutting-edge technologies available today. In this video, we'll cover a wide range of features that will help you build a fully functional and visually stunning chat application. First, we'll harness the power of Next13 utilizing the app router for efficient routing and dynamic page rendering. Next, we'll delve into React for building reusable components that will form the backbone of our application. To create a modern and visually appealing design, we'll employ Tailwind CSS and Headless UI, which will allow us to create a sleek user interface while ensuring a seamless user experience. For our backend, we'll combine the robustness of Prisma with the flexibility of MongoDB to create an efficient and scalable database solution. This will ensure that our app can handle a multitude of users and conversions with ease. In terms of security, we'll incorporate NextOut to manage user authentication and protect sensitive data. We'll also enable social login using popular platforms such as Google and GitHub, making it easy and convenient for users to sign up and log in. To bring our Messenger clone to life, we'll leverage the power of Pusher for real-time messaging and notifications, creating a truly immersive and interactive experience for our users. For image upload, we're going to use Cloudinary, and finally, we'll explore React Hook Form for efficient form handling, ensuring that user input is managed seamlessly throughout the application. And in the end, you're gonna learn how to deploy all of this on Vercel. So, buckle up and get ready to level up your web development skills as we dive into this feature-rich tutorial and create a messenger clone that rivals the best in the industry. So let's go ahead and head into your terminal, and we're going to use the npx create-next-app command to initialize our new Next13 project. And in the newest update, you can actually use the flag --tailwind to initialize the project without need to manually configure Tailwind, which I think is a great thing, and we're going to use that today. So let's go into our terminal and let's run npx create-next-app at latest --typescript --tailwind, like that, and press enter. Press yes, and let's name our project. In my case, it's going to be Messenger-clone. For the ESLint option, select yes. For the source directory, select no. For the experimental app directory, make sure you select yes, because we're going to use the experimental app directory in this project. For the import alias, you can just press enter, and that is going to start installing all of the packages we need for this project. Great! And now that this has finished, you can actually go ahead and you can open your newly created Messenger clone folder right here, or whatever you named your project. So I'm gonna click open here, and I'm gonna see this new structure that we have. As you can see, we already have tailwind.config.js configured for us right here, along with some theme options here. And we also have the post CSS. These are the things we usually had to build ourselves. So without further ado, let's actually go into the terminal and let's start this project to see what we're actually working with. So go ahead and run npm run dev and press enter. And now you can go ahead and go into localhost 3000 in your browser and refresh or press enter if you haven't already. Wait a couple of seconds and you should be able to see the new Next13 welcome screen. Great, and now you have the new Next13 welcome screen. What I want to do next is I want to clean this up a little bit, because we're not going to need any of this here. So I'm just going to collapse the terminal right here, and I'm going to go into the app folder. And here we are greeted with the layout and page.tsx files. So let's check both of them out. So inside this home right here, what you can do is you can just remove everything except the return function. So just go ahead, like this, and just remove everything. And instead of this, I'm just going to write a simple div, and I'm going to write a paragraph which is going to say hello messenger, like this. And you can just save the file. Great. And now you can see I have this hello messenger text right here. So I'm doing this in the page.tsx file right here. Great. Now the layout can stay as it is. So in the layout file, you can edit the metadata if you want. You can edit the font. Nothing else to do here. So let's go ahead in this metadata. If you want to, you can change the title to Messenger Clone, for example, and you can change the description to Messenger Clone as well. And in a couple of seconds after this hot reloads, you can see that my tab name has changed to Messenger Clone. Great, so what we've done so far is we edited the page.tsx file to be a very simple hello messenger home function, and the layout, well, we just modified the metadata. The rest can stay the same. Great. What I want to do now is I want to go into globals.css right here. And as you can see, we have some predefined styles here. We're actually not going to need any of these. So let's go ahead and you can remove everything except the tailwind directives right here. So just make sure you clean it like that. And now let's go ahead and write some additional classes which we are going to need here. So go ahead and write HTML, body, root, like that, and just write height 100%. Great. And you can go ahead and save the file, and your screen should turn to white. Maybe it already was white, perhaps it depends on the dark and light mode in your system. But when you remove all the styles and write your globals.css file like this, it should look something like that. Great. And now you can go into tailwind.config.js right here, and you can actually remove this extend object in its entirety like this. You can just make sure it's an empty extend because we're not going to need any of those gradients there defined. Great. Amazing job. And now just to test out if everything is working fine, let's go into app, into page.tsx right here, and let's try and give this text a color and increase the font size. So I'm gonna go ahead and write class name is equal to text-sky-500 and text-3xl, for example. And as you can see, when it hot reloads, it changes the way our page looks. Great, amazing job. And you can also remove this import image from next image at the top because we're not gonna be using it. And the same goes with the inter font. So your page.tsx file can be a very simple function, home, which just returns a div which has a paragraph inside with two very simple class names using Tailwind. Great, this saved us a lot of time. Usually we had to define Tailwind ourselves. Great job. Alright, so now let's go ahead and let's start creating our authentication screen, which is going to be routed at the / path. So this initial localhost 3000 is actually going to show our authentication screen, and if we are logged in, it's going to redirect to /conversations or /users. Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down my project right here. So I have it running, but I'm going to shut it down because we're going to modify this a little bit, and I just don't want to cause any problems. So we're going to write our authentication screen inside this page.tsx, but I don't want to keep my initial page.tsx in the root of the app folder. I want to have it in a separate folder. And there is a cool way we can do that by creating a new folder and write parentheses site inside. This is the equivalent of an index folder app like that. Great. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy everything inside page.tsx like that, and I'm going to create a new file inside the site folder called page.tsx just like that. And I'm going to paste this here, and we can change hello messenger to hello index page like this. Great. And now that I have this app parentheses site folder inside with page.tsx here, I can actually go ahead and remove this app page.tsx like that. And now I'm going to go and head into my terminal again, and I'm going to run npm run dev. And I'm just going to refresh this, and in a couple of seconds we're going to see if we did everything correctly. Great. As you can see, we now have hello index page. Great. So that means that now we can safely work inside this parentheses side folder and treat it like it's the root of the app folder. Great. So let's go ahead and I'm actually going to remove this inside, and at this top div, I'm going to give it a couple of class names. So I'm going to write the following. I'm going to write flex min-h-full flex-call justify-center py-12 sm px-6 lg px-8 dg-gray-800, like that. And you can see that we have this grayed out background now. Perhaps it's not so visible for you, but it is a tiny bit less visible than fully white. Now you might be wondering, why do I have this color block right here, and how come when I hover my cursor on these classes, I can actually see what they mean in CSS. If you want to have the exact same effect, you can go into your extensions right here and make sure you install the Tailwind CSS IntelliSense extension like that. And then you're going to have the exact same thing that I am. You're also going to get a bit of autocomplete as well, and this is very useful. If you're interested in what specific Tailwind class does, you can just hover and it's going to show you the exact CSS. And it's also going to convert these RAM values to pixels for you to easier understand what they are. Great. Now inside of this div, let's create another div and let's give it a class name of sm mx-auto sm-w-full and sm-max-w-md, like that. Great. And inside of that, we're going to add our Messenger logo. So before we do that, we actually need to get an image. And to do that, go into my repository, the link is in the description, or you can Google a Messenger logo or any other logo if you want to. And you can go into my repository, go into public right here, go into images and logo.png, and you can just go ahead and download this image. Great. And now you can go into public, you can create a new folder right here called images, and you can drag and drop logo inside. And make sure it's not named logo 4 or logo 2. This will happen if you already have logo files in your download folder. So just make sure you rename it to logo.png, like that. And now we can go back into app folder, parentheses side folder, page.tsx right here, and you can actually import the image component from next/image. So import image from next/image like this. Great. And it's a self-closing tag just like that. So first let's give it an alt. An alt is going to be our logo. Next, we're going to give it a height of 48. We're going to give it a width of 48 as well. Sorry, 48 like that. And we're going to give it a class name of mx-auto, w-auto as well. And we're going to give it a source of /images/logo.png like that. And that is going to be it. You can save the file and head back into your Messenger clone. And you can see we have a nice centered little image of our Messenger logo right here. Great. And just below this image right here, I want to write a paragraph called h2, sorry, a heading h2 like that. And I want to give it a couple of class names. So I'm going to write class name. And inside, I'm going to write empty-6, text-center, text-3xl, font-bold, tracking-tight, and text-gray-900. And inside of that heading, I want to write sign in to your account like that. Great. And now we have this sign into your account text here. And perhaps your text is a bit smaller. That is because I have zoomed in my screen to 150%. So perhaps it's going to look something like this. And outside of this div, you can for now just write a comment because this is where we're going to put our out form in the next part. Like that. Great. So let's recap what we did. So we had our page.tsx file inside of our app folder and it served as a root file. But because I want to keep this in a separate folder, because we're going to have a new folder inside of that called components and perhaps something else scattered around, I want to keep it structured inside this specific folder. So that's why I moved the page.tsx inside this special convention named parentheses site folder, which serves the exact same purpose and it's treated like a root file. We also added an image of our logo.png and we use that in page.tsx right here. Great job. So let's go ahead and let's continue with the development of our out screen. So in here, where we wrote the comment out form, let's replace that and write the actual component out form like this. And if you save, we're going to get an error because out form is not defined. So what I want to do is I want to create a components folder inside this site folder right here. So go ahead and write components like that and just write out form.tsx like that. And you can just go ahead and create a very simple out form component like this with a div out form like that. Great, and you can save that and then you can go back into your page.tsx and you can import it from ./components/outform like that. And if you save, the error should go away. Great, and now we have this little text out form right here, which comes from this out form component. Great, so let's go ahead and let's write something at the top. We're going to write use client. The reason we're going to write use client inside of here is because we're going to make this out form interactive. We're going to have inputs, we're going to have buttons, we're going to have some use effects, we're going to have a bunch of things which are not compatible with server components. So we have to define use client at the top. So Next13 knows, okay, this is a client component, I'm not going to treat it as a server component. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's go into our terminal. And I want to do something, I want to install a couple of packages. So I'm going to go and I'm going to write npm install, and I'm going to write react-icons. Also, I'm going to write react-hook-form, and I'm going to write clsx like that. Great. So these are the three packages we're going to install. It's going to be react-icons, it's going to be react-hook-form, and clsx like that. And you can just press enter and wait a couple of seconds for these to install. Great, and you can go ahead and run npm run dev again. Make sure you refresh after you run npm run dev. Great, and just wait a second for this to load again. Great, and now we can go back into outform.tsx right here and just change something to ensure everything is working fine. Great, it's changed for me immediately, so everything is fine. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a state here called variant. So I'm going to write const variant and comma set variant from use state like that. And you can import use state from React like that. And I'm going to define types for this variant. So I'm going to write type variant is equal to either login or register like that. So this is a pipe symbol right here. And we're going to use this variant to define the possibilities of this use state function here. So it's going to be variant, and the default option inside of it, you can already see how TypeScript autocompletes for us. So it's either going to be login or register. I want to make it default to be login like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and below that, we're going to write another state, const is loading, set is loading like that, also use state, and default is going to be false. We're going to use this to disable our buttons and inputs after we have submitted our form. Great. Now let's write a function which is going to toggle between login and register variant. So I'm going to write const toggle variant like that. It's going to be a use callback function, so we memorize this function. Go ahead and write an arrow function inside of that. And what I'm going to write is I'm going to change the variant depending on the current state of the variant. So I'm going to write a very simple if clause. If variant is equal to login, in that case, we're going to go ahead and write set variant is going to be register. Great. Otherwise, is going to be set variant login, like that. Great. And in the dependency array, make sure you add the variant variable like that. Great. Now, below that, we're going to create our React hook form submit function and other functions. So go ahead and write const. You can create an empty object for now, write equals use form, which you can import from react-hook-form, which we installed just a minute ago. Great. And now let's define the types for this use form. So you can go ahead and open these pointy brackets here, and inside of that, you're going to write field values, and you can import field values from React hook form as well, like that. Great. And now you can open parentheses here and open an object inside and go ahead and write default values like this. And you're going to write name and give it an empty string. You're going to write email, give it an empty string, and password, and give it an empty string as well. So these are going to be the default possible values in our form. So obviously, if we are registering, we're going to have name, email, and password. But if we are logging in, we're just going to use email and password. And now in this empty object, you can actually extract some functions. So we're going to extract register, we're going to extract handle submit, and we're going to extract form state, and we're going to destructure it immediately and just take errors, because that's all we're going to need from the form state. Great. You can go ahead and save that. Nothing much should change because this is just some logic which we've written here for us. Great. Now what I want to do is I want to write our onSubmit function, which for now is not going to do anything. So go ahead and write const onSubmit and give it a value of submit handler, which you can import again from react-hook-form. So I'm just going to collapse this so you can nicely see everything. So far we've imported use form, submit handler, and field values from react-hook-form right here. Great. And inside of this submit handler, you can open pointy brackets again and just write field values again like that. Great. It's going to be an arrow function, which for the first parameter is going to accept data. So just go ahead and open the function like that. And inside, first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this set is loading to be true, because obviously if we are submitting, that means we have to enable our loading. So go ahead and write set is loading to be true like that. Great. And now I'm just going to write a couple of empty if clauses, because for now this onSubmit is not going to do much, because we have no Prisma, we have no database, we have no routes ready, but let's just write a placeholder for what it's going to be. So go ahead and write if variant is equal to register, just write a comment Axios register. So in the future, we're going to make an Axios call to our register route. And below that, you can write if variant is equal to login, and you can just say a comment next out sign in, because we're going to use a library called next out, and we're going to immediately use its sign in function here like that. Great job. All right. And below that, we're also going to create another function, which is going to be called social action. So const social action is also going to be an arrow function. The first parameter it's going to take is action, which is a type of string like that. And all it's going to do is also going to set is loading to true. And we're going to write a very simple comment, next out social sign in. Great. So we have defined placeholders for everything we're going to need. And now we can start and style our form. Great. So go ahead and remove this inside of this div. And for the first one, let's give it the following class names. So class name is going to be empty-8, smmx-auto, smw-full, smax-w-md, like that. Great. Now inside of that, you're going to write another div just like this, and you're going to give it another set of class names. So class name here is going to be bg-white, px-4, py-8, shadow, sm rounded-lg, and smpx-10. Great. And if you save the file, you're actually going to see a little box here in which we're going to add our inputs, our buttons, and some other text. Great. So now inside of this new box that we created, so this div, go ahead and write the form element. Great. You can actually remove the action because we're not going to use it in the PHP way. We're going to use it in the React way. And let's give it a couple of attributes. So we're going to give it a class name of space -y-6, and we're going to give it an onSubmit function of handle submit, which is going to wrap our onSubmit like that. So where do we get the handle submit from, and what is onSubmit? So our handle submit function right here is exported from useForm, and our handle submit is going to wrap our onSubmit function right here. So why does that work that way? Well, that is how we get the data from this React hook form. That's the only reason we need to wrap this onSubmit inside handle submit, because if we just wrote onSubmit here, technically, yeah, this function will definitely get triggered. But guess what? We will not have this data because there is no way this form can actually know for it. That's why we have to write handle submit inside parentheses onSubmit like that. And then this handle submit is going to pass that data right here, and we're going to be able to use it and send it to our server. Great. And now inside of this form, we're going to create our input component. So let's go ahead and write input just like this. And if you save, of course, we're going to get an error because input does not exist. So to fix that, I want to go ahead into our app folder right here, and I want to go and create a new folder called components. So this components folder is not going to be tied to the app folder, to the site folder like here. It's going to be in the root of the app folder inside. And inside of that components folder, we're going to create inputs folder like that. Great. And inside of that, you can go ahead and create a new file, input.tsx, like that. Great. So you should have the app folder, the components folder, the input folder inside that components folder, and input.tsx inside. Great. And let's just quickly fix this error. So I'm going to write a very simple input component here, and it's going to return a div which says I am an input, like that. Great. And now you can go back into the site components auth form right here, and you can import that from add/app/components inputs input like this. So you can see how my project used the @ sign. If you're wondering where that came from, that is during our initialization where we defined an alias. I told you to just press enter. That defaults to this @ sign. So if you just press enter, you can write it exactly like this and it's going to work for you. But if for any case this is not working for you, you can use the good old regular /components/inputs/input like that, just in case it doesn't work for you. But feel free to use the @app sign as well. Great. So you can either do it like that or you can do it. So I'm just going to demonstrate here. I'm going to rename this to input2. And instead of this, I'm going to use add/app/components, and you can see that it leads to this input that we created. Great. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and great, our error has gone away. The error is not here anymore. Great. Now let's go back into our components input folder, input.tsx file, and let's actually make this functional. So first things first, make sure you write use client at the top because input is going to be interactive. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to import CLSX from CLSX like that, which is a package we installed earlier. Great. Now you're going to import field errors, comma, field values, and use form register like that from react-hook-form like that. Perfect. Now let's write the types for our input. So interface input props is going to have a label, which is a type of string. It's going to have an ID, which is a type of string. It's going to have a type, which is an optional type of string. It's going to have the required boolean like this, which is also optional, so we don't have to always pass it. We're going to have the register, which is required, and the type of register is use form register, open pointy brackets, and write field values like that. Great. Now we're gonna have also an errors object, which is the type of field errors, which we have imported from here, and we're gonna have disabled, which is optional boolean like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's assign this input props to this input right here. So go ahead and write react.fc, open pointing brackets, and you can just copy input props and paste it right here. And now let's destructure all of these values. So label, ID, type, required, register, errors, and disabled like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's actually start styling our div. Great. So inside this div, instead of the text, we're gonna have our first component, our first element, which is a label. The HTML4 is gonna be targeting our ID right here, which we have in our props. And the label is also going to have a couple of class names. So let's go ahead and give it that first before we start writing anything else. So class name is going to have block, text-sm, font-medium, leading-6, text-gray-900 like that. And we're going to have the text we're gonna pass inside is label like this. Great. So right now nothing should happen, but if you go back into outform.tsx and pass in the label here, for example email, you can see that we have a little label right here. Great job. All right, and now just below that we're gonna write our actual input. But before we do that, we have to install another package called Tailwind CSS Form. So let's go ahead and let's go into our terminal again, and I recommend shutting down your application for now and go ahead and write npm install at tailwind css-forms like that, and just press enter and wait a couple of seconds for this to install. Great. And now before you run the application, I actually want you to go into tailwind.config.js right here. And you're gonna go into plugins, you're gonna write require, and inside you're gonna write at tailwind css-forms, which we just installed. And you're gonna write, you're gonna open this function like that, and you're gonna immediately return an object inside. You're gonna write strategy class like this. So make sure in your tailwind.config.js in the plugins array, you require the newly installed Tailwind CSS-forms, and the strategy you use is class. I'm gonna explain that in a bit now when we will write the classes. So go ahead back into your terminal and just make sure you run npm run dev again. And before you start developing, always make sure you refresh your page so everything is up to date. Great. And now I'm gonna collapse this terminal and I'm gonna go back not into outform, but in our input component. So go ahead into components, input folder, input right here. And just below this label, you're going to create another div right here. You're going to give it a class name of empty-2. And inside, you're going to write the native HTML input component like that. Great, it is a self-closing tab, and we're gonna give it a couple of attributes. So first, let's give it an ID, which is an ID, a type, which is type. Let's give it an autocomplete ID like that, disabled, and now we're gonna open an object and we're going to spread our register function like that, and the first parameter is going to be ID and the second is going to be an object, and we're just going to write required. So this is equivalent of writing required, but we're going to use a shorthand because the key and the value is the same. Great. If you save, you're actually going to get an error, but don't worry, we're going to fix that in just a second. So the way you fix that is you go back into your out form right here, and what do? Well, you just pass in the register prop. And what do you pass inside? Well, this register which we destructured from use form. So just go ahead and pass register like that. And that is going to fix your error. And now, yeah, we have not passed the ID, so also make sure you pass the ID email like that. Great, no errors now. So make sure you pass the ID, make sure you pass the label, and make sure you pass the register like that. Obviously, it's a red underline because it's missing a couple of more things here, but we're gonna do that in a moment. For now, let's head back into components / inputs folder, input right here, and let's continue developing. So I'm gonna write a class name here. And it's not going to be a string, it's actually going to use our CLSX, which we imported right here at the top. So this CLSX is a library which allows us to dynamically use our classes. So go ahead and open parentheses here, and you can either write all of this in one line like this using the normal parentheses, but I'm going to write in multiple lines, so I'm going to use this backticks so I can collapse classes like that. Again, you don't have to do this, so feel completely free to just write classes like text, SM, all in one line if you want to. But just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to use backticks so I can safely collapse this into multiple lines. If you want to, you can use backticks as well, but it's not required. The first class I'm going to give it is form-input. And you can already see how we have this a little box right here. So this form-input usually does not exist in Tailwind. So why does it work for us? Well, that is because if you remember, just a couple of moments ago, we installed the Tailwind CSS / forms package, and we added that into our plugins right here. So that's why we can safely use that in our input component. Great, let's continue with the styling. So let's write block w-full rounded -md border -0 py-1.5 text -gray -900 shadow -sm ring -1 ring -inset ring -gray -300 placeholder text -gray -400 focus ring -2 focus ring -inset focus again ring -sky -600 sm text -sm and sm leading -6 like that. Great. And now I'm just going to collapse it like this, and you can actually write a comma after this, so still inside this parenthesis of CLSX inside, and let's write some dynamic classes here. So first, errors ID. So if there is an ID inside of our errors, we're going to give it a class name of focus ring rows 500. So we're going to give it a red outline if there is an error, and we're going to use the same method to disable our styles. So disabled and end. And it's going to write opacity -50 and cursor -default. Great. And if you save, you're going to get an error because we have not passed the errors. So let's go back into our form right here, and let's just pass errors like that. Where do we get the errors from? Again, we get it from this destructured form state from the use form hook right here. Great. And you can see we have our nice little input right here. Great. And just to wrap it up, alright, so this is our completed input component. It has everything we need, and it uses this register to handle on change, on focus, on blur, a bunch of these functions which we don't have to write ourselves. And we use this dynamic CLSX to write these dynamic classes alongside these default ones here. Great, great job. Alright, let's go back into out form now, and let's actually modify this a little bit. So instead of just writing email, we're going to write different things depending on the variant that our out form is. So our variants are either register or login. So let's go ahead inside of this form object right here, and I'm going to write a dynamic here. So variant is equal to register and end. I'm going to open parentheses and we're gonna render this input. But instead of email, this is going to be an ID of name and a label of name. Great. So only if we are registering, we're going to show this name input. Otherwise, we're not going to show anything. Great. Just below that, we're going to write some more inputs, the inputs we need for other states, which is login. So go ahead and paste this here. And this one, instead of name, is going to have email, is going to have a label of email address and a type of email like that. Great. And just below that, you can copy and paste again. An ID here is going to be password. The label is going to be password, and type is going to be password as well. Great. So now we have these two beautiful inputs right here. Great. And now what I'm going to below this is write another div, and we're going to create a new component called button. So go ahead and write button like this, and you can just go ahead and write test inside. And if we save, of course, we get an error because button does not exist. So where do we create our button? Well, we create it in our global components folder. So inside app, inside components, create a new file called button.tsx. So just to answer the question, why is the input inside the inputs folder, but button is standalone? Well, because we're going to have a couple of inputs. We're also going to have the select input, but not for now. So this button is the only variant of the button, so that's why it can be standalone inside of this components folder structure wise. Great. Now let's just write a very simple button component here, and I'm just going to return a div which says hello button like that. Let's go back into out form and let's just import this button. You can see it automatically uses the add prefix for me. So add/app/component/button. Again, if add doesn't work for you, you can just use this .. abbreviance of it. Great. And if you save, the error should go away. And we do get an underline because we're passing children, but we have not defined that children are available inside the button component. Great. So let's go back into our button.tsx. And let's add some imports here. So we're going to write use client at the top. I'm going to import CLSX from CLSX like this. And I'm going to write an interface for our button. So interface button props is going to be type. Now the type can either be button or submit or reset or undefined like that. The full width prop is going to be an optional boolean. The children is going to be an optional as well, and it's going to be react.react node like that. Then we're going to have an onClick, which is also optional, and a type of void like that. Secondary, which is an optional boolean. Danger, which is the exact same optional boolean, and at last disabled, which is exactly the same as the previous two. Great. And now let's assign these props. So react.fc button props like that. And let's extract all of those. So type, full width, children, onClick, secondary, danger, and disabled like that. Great. And now let's go ahead and replace this div with a button element like that. So I'm going to give it an onClick of onClick like that. I'm going to give it a type of type. I'm going to give it a disabled of disabled. And class name is going to be dynamic. So go ahead and write CLSX. Again, I'm going to use backticks for this so I can write in multiple lines right here. Like that. So I'm going to write flex justify dash center rounded dash MD px dash 3 py dash 2 text dash sm font dash semi bold focus dash visible outline focus dash visible outline dash 2 focus dash visible outline dash offset -2. So I'm writing a couple of these focus dash visible just so we are more semantically correct when it comes to our styles. And now I'm going to write a comma here for the other arguments, and these are going to be our dynamic classes. So first I'm going to handle the disabled state. So if it's disabled, I'm going to give it the class name of opacity-50 and cursor-default. Next, I'm going to write the full width. So if it's full width, very simple, I'm just going to give it a class of w-full. Great. Next, we're going to have secondary, which is going to be this shorthand if clause. So if it's secondary, it's going to have a text-gray-900. Otherwise, it's going to have text-white like that. Next thing we're going to have is danger. So if there is a danger, we're going to give it a class name of bg-rows-500, hover bg-rows-600, and focus-visible outline-rows-600 like that. So on danger, we have bg-rows-500, hover bg-rows-600, and focus-visible outline-rows-600. Great. All right. And below that, we're going to write if it's not secondary, so exclamation point secondary. So if it's not secondary, and if it's not danger, then we're just going to give it our default styles that we want, which is a very simple bg-sky 500, hover bg-sky-600, and focus-visible outline-sky-600. Great. So very simple, like we did above, but instead of using rows values, we're using sky values, which are our default nice blue color, which do not indicate any errors. Great. And inside of this button, I'm just gonna render children like this. And great, you can now see the test button is right here. Great job. So just to recap, it's a very simple component which has dynamic classes, and if you cannot see these classes, I just collapse them. So on danger, bg rows, hover bg rows, and focus visible outline rows. On secondary, if it's not secondary and if it's not danger, we give it the default of bg sky 500, hover bg sky 600, and focus visible outline sky 600 as well. Great. Now let's go back into our outForm component right here. And instead of a hard coding test, we're going to write depending on the variant. So if variant is equal to login, in that case, we're going to write sign in. Otherwise, we're going to write register like that. So by default, we are in login variant, so the text is going to be sign in. Great. Now the props we're going to give to this button is disabled if is loading. We're going to give it a full width as well. And a type is going to be submit. This way, we don't need an explicit onClick function for this button, because this button is inside of our form element right here, which means that when we click on this button, it is going to trigger the onSubmit function right here. Great job. All right. So just below our form element right here, we're going to write another div. And this div is going to have a class name of empty-6 at the top, so it separates a bit from the form. And inside of that, we're going to create another div with a class name of relative, like that. And I'm just going to collapse it like here. And inside of there, we're going to write another div and give it the following class names. So class name is going to be absolute inset-0 flex and items-center like that. Great. And inside of that div, we're going to create another div, very simple one, which is going to have a class name of w-full border-t and border-gray-300 like that. So we have this little line here. And if you want to, you can actually remove the closing tag and just make it a self-closing tag like this. So it's just border with this. I'm just gonna collapse this so it's easier for you to see like this. So feel free to make it much simpler like that. Great. And now below that, and below this div right here, you're gonna create a new div with a class name of relative flex justify dash center and text dash sm class right here. And inside of that, you're going to write a span with a class name of bg-white px-2 and text-gray-500 like that. So the top div is gonna have the following class names. So relative flex justify center and text sm, and the span is gonna have bg-white px2 and text gray like that. And inside of the span, we're gonna write or continue with like that. Great. So you can see how we have this nice little effect where our text is in between this line. Great. And now just below that, below this div and below this div as well, like this. So it goes span, end of this div, end of this div, and just in here we're gonna find a little space to create another element, also a div. We're gonna give it a class name of empty-6 flex in gap-2 like that. And inside of there, we're gonna write another component called out social button like that. And if you save, we're gonna get an error because this does not exist. So to fix that, inside our app folder, inside the site folder, inside this components, we're gonna create a new file, out social button.tsx like that. So let's just go ahead and fix the error. I'm gonna write out social button like that, and I'm just gonna return a div which is gonna say social button. Great. And I can quickly go back into my out form and just import this from out social button. So why is this out social button and these are in components? Well, because we're in the same folder right here. So we did not create out social button inside our app components, but inside our site folder inside components right here, because it's not going to be reused anywhere else besides this screen right here. And you can see how we have the text social button right here. Great. So enter this out social button now, and let's add a class name here. So import, sorry, not class name, let's add an import icon type from react-icons like that. If you have not installed react-icons, which we did previously along with all those other packages, just make sure you go into your terminal and run npm install react-icons. And now let's write interface out social button props like that, and write icon, which is a type of icon type, and write on click, which is a type of void like that. Great. Now let's assign this props. So react-fc out social button props, and let's just extract these values. So icon, which you can immediately remap to capital icon like that, so we can use it as a component, and on click like this. Great. Instead of div, we're gonna return a button like this, and the button is gonna have a couple of attributes. So type is going to be button, on click is going to be on click, and class name is gonna be all static. And we're gonna write inline dash flex w dash full justify dash center rounded dash md bg dash white px dash 4 py dash 2 text dash gray dash 500 shadow dash sm ring dash 1 ring dash inset ring dash gray dash 300 hover bg dash gray dash 50 and focus outline dash offset dash 0 like that. So we have plethora of class names here, but it's going to be all worded for the effect. And inside of the button, we're going to render our icon like that. So where can we use this icon? Well, because we remapped it right here. And as you can see, I'm getting an error here, and that is because in the out form, I did not pass the icon. So let's go ahead and let's actually add some attributes here in the out form. So the icon is going to be bs github like that. And you can import BS GitHub right here at the top. So import BS GitHub from react-icons/BS like that. And if you save now and refresh, in a couple of seconds, the error should go away and you have a nice GitHub icon right here. Great. And now let's also give it on click, which is gonna trigger the social action with an action type of GitHub like that. Great. And you can just copy and paste this. And this one is gonna be BS Google, which you can also import from react-icons/BS. So BS GitHub and BS Google like that. And social action here is going to be Google just like that. Great. So now we have these two social actions here. Great job. And last thing we have to write is the function to toggle between register and login. So we're going to write that outside of this div right here. So outside of here, we're going to write another div like this, and we're going to give it a class name of flex-gap-2 justify-center text-sm empty-6 px-2 text-gray-500 like that. And inside of that, we're going to write another div, which is going to be conditional. So if variant is type of login, we're going to ask a question new to Messenger like that. Otherwise, we're going to ask already have an account question mark like that. Great. So now you can see we have this question new to Messenger if the default is login. So user can click here and then it's going to change to register. Great. And just below this div, create another div and give it an on-click of toggle variant, which we created at the beginning of our tutorial, and give it a class name of underline cursor dash pointer like that. And again, it's going to be dynamic depending on the variant. So if variant is type of login, in that case, the action is going to be create an account. Otherwise, it's going to be login like this. Great. So now at the bottom, we have this question new to Messenger. And if we click create an account, you can see that we are switched to the register screen. So we now have the name input, and this has changed to already have an account where we can click login and we are back into the sign up screen. Great job. So you finished the placeholder, so currently not functional, but the design is here and everything from now on is very easy. And we have created the crucial components which we're going to need throughout our application, which are inputs and buttons. So I just want to quickly recap what we've done so far. So inside our auth form right here, we added the actions which we're going to use to sign up. We created the input component, which handles the React hook form functionality and changes depending if we have an error or if it's disabled. And you can actually click sign in and you can see how we actually disabled this button right here, for example. So what I want to do now is I want to also use this is loading to disable our inputs. So right here, where the variant register is name, I want to give it disabled is loading like that. And you can copy and paste that in every input we have like that. Great. And now if you refresh and if you click sign in, you can see that the email is disabled, the password is disabled, and the sign in button is disabled. Great. Right now it stays disabled because we have not added a function to remove it back to false, but we're gonna do that in the next part of the tutorial. Great job. You've written some great UI and code so far. Alright, so in this part of the tutorial, we're going to set up a Prisma and a connection to our MongoDB database. So to do that, let's go ahead and let's go into our terminal. Let's shut down the application and let's run npm install -d Prisma like that and press enter. After a couple of seconds, the packages will install and we are ready to run another command. Great. So after this has been installed, go ahead and run the following command: npx prisma init, and press enter. Wait a couple of seconds and you should have your Prisma set up. And if you take a look at your structure right now, I'm going to collapse everything here and take a look. You have a new folder called Prisma along with schema.prisma right here. We have predefined it as PostgreSQL. We're going to change that to MongoDB in a moment. And we also have a new file .env also generated by Prisma. In here we have a database URL pointing to a non-existing PostgreSQL database. We are going to change that with our MongoDB database. So first things first, let's go into our schema.prisma right here, and let's change the PostgreSQL to MongoDB like this. So provider should be MongoDB. And now we have to get the proper database URL, which we're going to fill in our .environment file in database_URL file right here. So go into Google and write MongoDB Atlas. Press on the first link right here. Then press on sign in, and you can either create an account, use your email, or Google GitHub. After you are in, you're going to be greeted with a screen similar to this. Find the button which says build a database, and let's start building our database. You're going to select the M0 or the free cluster right here, so just make sure it says free. For me, it's the most right option right here, and just confirm one more time that it's free right here at the bottom above the create button. You can leave the provider, region, and cluster name as it is, and just press create. Now let's define our user. So my user is going to be I already have an existing one, but I'm going to remove it just so I have the same situation as you. So my username is going to be Antonio, and my password is also going to be Antonio. When you create your password, make sure you don't put special characters such as question marks inside, because that is going to cause errors. And just click create user. Great, now we have our user. You can leave the local environment here, and for the IP address, you can either click here to add your current IP address, but there is a chance that you have a dynamic IP and that it's not going to work for you. So just go ahead and write 0.0.0.0/0 like that, and press add entry. 0.0.0 will allow access from anywhere, and then just click finish and close, and press go to databases like that. Great, now that you have your cluster right here, you can go ahead and click on the big connect button here. And I want you to select VS Code option right here, because it gives us a specific type of URL which we are able to use in our environment file. So go ahead and copy this right here, and now go back into your VS Code, and you're going to replace this database URL with the new MongoDB URL which we just created. So it should look something like this: MongoDB plus srv -- Antonio. And now what you have to do is replace this pointy brackets password with your actual password that we created just a moment ago. In my case, it was Antonio. So all I have to do is replace this password with Antonio like this. And make sure that you have /test at the end. This is the name of your database. It should be automatically here if you copied it from this link right here. Great. Go ahead and save your environment file, and now that that is done, you can go back into schema.prisma, and we can go ahead and start defining our models and relations. But before we do that, if for some reason your schema.prisma file is completely blank, for example, your generator client is not blue, your strings are not yellow, and these variables are not white, that is because you're missing an extension for Prisma. So just go into your extensions and write Prisma. And in here, you should find the extension called Prisma, which adds the syntax highlighting and other autocomplete functions. So let's go back into our Prisma folder in schema.prisma right here, and let's start defining our models. First model we're going to write is the user model. So go ahead and write model user, and let's define the ID. The ID is a type of string, a special decorator at ID, special decorator at default. Inside of its brackets, write auto, and just execute that auto function. Whoops, like this. Great. And now we have to map this ID to special MongoDB _ID. So write @map question mark annotations underscore ID like that, and lastly at db.object ID like that, and the error should go away. So this is the type of ID which we're going to use in all of our models. So ID is a type of string, special decorator at ID. We're going to give it a default value of auto. We're going to map it to underscore ID because this is what's underneath the hood of this Prisma. We're using MongoDB. So in MongoDB, the IDs begin with an underscore ID. So we have to map our ID object to that. And we just add another decorator at the end, db.objectID. After that, we're going to have a name, which is a type of optional string. We're going to have an email, which is a type of optional string, and a decorator at unique, because we don't want multiple users with the same email. We're also going to have a field email verified, and that is going to be a optional date time like this. Below that, we're going to have an image, which is a type of string. We're going to have hashed password, which is a type of string as well, and it's optional. We're going to have two date time types here, created at, which is a type of date time, and the default decorator of now. We're also going to have updated at, which is a date time, at updated at decorator. Great. And now we're going to create some relations for this user model. So this is our base user. It's going to have an ID, name, email verified, image, hashed password, created at, and updated at. The reason hashed password is optional, email verified is optional, and all of these things is because we are also going to enable social login. And for social login, some of these things are not needed, and we want them to give control over that. So now let's write the relations for all of our conversations that the user will be able to have. So go ahead and write conversations IDs, which is a type of string, which is an array, and a decorator db.objectID. So conversation IDs is going to be an array of strings with a special decorator object ID. So this is where we're going to store IDs of all of the conversations this user is a part of. And to map that to actual conversations, we're going to write conversations, conversation, which is a model we don't yet have. Make sure you don't misspell it. Conversation like that. And we have to define a relation. So go ahead and write at relation fields, open an array. And the field we're going to use is this conversation IDs right here. So just put that in the array of fields like that. Write a comma, references, and inside of the ID of references, just write ID. So what does this mean? We're going to have an object, a property in this user model, which maps our conversation model, which does not exist yet, as an array, and it uses the conversation IDs, which refer to an ID of this conversation, which we're going to create in a minute. Great. Now below that, we have to create some more relations for this user. So go ahead and write scene message IDs like that, and just write string, which is also an array of at db.objectID, and below that scene messages like this, and that is going to be a type of message array, and it's also going to need a relation like this, and we're going to give a special name to this relation called scene with a capital S, and then we're going to write fields. Inside this array, we're going to put scene message IDs, which we defined above, and references is just going to be ID as in above. Great. So we have defined two more properties here, scene message IDs and scene messages. It works exactly the same way. As the one above. One thing I want to quickly fix is conversation IDs. I don't want it to be named conversations IDs. I just want it to be named conversation IDs like this. And then you can go ahead and fix that in this field right here. So make sure you use conversation IDs and conversation IDs right here. And this will be conversations, so multiple. And this will be send messages, scene messages, and this will be scene message IDs like that. Great, perfect. And now let's just define a couple of more relations here. So every user is also going to be able to have an account. So write accounts, which is a type of an array of accounts, and messages, which is a type of an array of messages like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and define our conversation model. Sorry, first let's define our account model because we have to wrap up our user model. So model account is going to have an ID. So for that, you can just copy what you define in the user right here and paste it here because it's exactly the same. Below that, write user ID, which is a string, and a special decorator db.object ID, like that. Below that, write a type, which is a required string, provider, which is a string, provider account ID, which is another string, refresh underscore token, which is an optional string, and a type of db.string. So what is the difference between this string and this string? Well, we have to do this special typing in MongoDB because this is usually in PostgreSQL db.text, but that does not exist in Mongo, so we have to do this special mapping at db.string. All right. Below that, we're going to use access underscore token, which is also an optional string with a special decorator db.string as well. Below that, we're going to use expires underscore at, which is an optional integer. Below that, token underscore type, which is an optional string. Below that, we're going to use scope, which is an optional string as well. ID underscore token, which is an optional string with a decorator db.string again. And session underscore state, which is an optional string as well. And now we have to define the relation of this account with the user. So go ahead and write user, capital user at relation, fields, open an array, write user ID, references, ID, and on delete, cascade, like that. What this means is we are mapping our user model to this user ID field right here, and we are referring to the user ID right here. And on delete, we're just giving it instructions what happens when this relation is deleted. Great. And one more thing we have to add here is add at unique and write an array of provider and provider account ID. So we are also defining a rule for this account model that the combination of provider and provider account ID need to be unique. Great. Now let's go ahead and create our conversation model. So go ahead and write model conversation. And you can go ahead and copy the ID either from the user or from the account because it is exactly the same. Great. Next thing conversation is going to have is created at, which is a date time with the default of now, the same way our user had it. Then we're going to have last message at, which is a date time with the at default now as well. We're going to have a name, which is an optional string, is group, which is an optional boolean, like this. And now we're going to write some relations for this conversation. So each conversation is going to have a lot of messages. So go ahead and write messages IDs, which is a type of string of arrays, at db.object ID, and go ahead and write messages, message, like that. And below that, you're going to write user IDs, string, at db.object ID, like that. And below that, you're going to write users, user, array, relation, fields, user ID inside, references, ID, like that. Great. And what's left is to define our message model. So go ahead and write model message. You can copy the ID from conversation or any of the previous ones we've made. And before we continue, I have a typo here. So instead of user ID, we have to use this user IDs. So multiple user IDs right here. Great. So no error here. So users is a relation of fields targeting these user IDs and referring to an ID of each individual user. Great. Now let's continue with defining our message model. Other than ID, it's also going to have a body, which is a type of optional string. It's going to have an image, which is a type of optional string as well. Created at, which is a date time at default. Now, like that. And now we're going to have scene IDs, which is an array of string, and a special decorator db.object ID. Great. And now we're going to have to create a relation for these scene IDs. So go ahead and write scene user array at relation, name it scene, capital S, as we did right here in the user model. So it needs to be the same. comma, fields, array, scene IDs, which you defined right here above, comma, references, ID, like that. Perfect. And now below that, each message needs to have a relation with the conversation. So go ahead and write conversation ID, which is a type of string at db.object ID, like that. And below that, you can write conversation at relation fields conversation ID, which you defined right here above, comma, references, ID, and on delete cascade, like that. Perfect. And now we have to create the last relation, and that is with the sender ID, so the person who sent this message. So go ahead and write sender ID string at db.object ID, like that, and sender user at relation fields in the array, write sender ID and references ID, and on delete cascade, just like that. Great. And now you can go ahead and go through your Prisma file. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see this full things we've written. So we have our user model with an ID, name, email verified, image, hash password, created at and updated at. We have relations with conversation IDs and conversations. Again, make sure that in this field you actually use this conversation IDs right here. Same thing for scene messages. Make sure in scene messages you're using scene message IDs right here. Great. In the account, make sure you have this exact setup because it needs to have it exactly like this in order to work with social login. For the conversation, make sure you have messages IDs, message, make sure you have user IDs, which you use in these fields right here. And in the message model, make sure you have scene IDs, which you use in the scene, conversation ID, which you use in the conversation, and sender ID, which you use in the sender. Great, and now you can go back into your terminal. Just make sure you save your schema.prisma file right here. And you can run npx prisma db push. Great. You should have this message that collection users have been created, collection account has been created, conversation, and the message as well. And now it's going to run this generate command for you and create the Prisma client. And now you can go back into your MongoDB here and you can click browse collections here. And in your cluster, you should actually see account, conversation, message, and user. This means that Prisma has successfully connected with MongoDB. If for any reason you're having errors and the npx prisma db push did not work for you, there's a couple of reasons that might happen. First one is you did not add the proper URL in your .environment file. Maybe you added a space here, for example, that can cause errors, so make sure there is no space. Second one is you might have entered invalid email and password. You might have not put the database name at the end. Or the last one could be that in your network access right here, you do not have 0.0.0/0. So just make sure you have this so Prisma can access your database regardless if you have a dynamic IP address. Great, great job. All right, so we're going to continue and we're going to create our next out system in this part of the tutorial. One thing I want to mention, if you found this part of defining schema.prisma complicated or you feel like you might have missed something, don't worry, you can always visit my GitHub and you can find Prisma schema.prisma file right here, which has all of that defined, so you can just copy it or double check if you've written it from the tutorial correctly. Great. Now let's go back and let's head into our terminal right here. I'm gonna shut down my application. In fact, it wasn't even running, and I'm gonna write the following commands. I'm gonna expand this a little bit. We're gonna install a couple of packages. So npm install next-auth at prisma/client at next-auth/prisma-adapter and bcrypt. And if you want to, you can also add a decorator to the next out at latest like this, so you have the newest version of next out, even though it should automatically pull the newest version. But just in case, if you want to, you can write npm install next-auth/latest, because the older versions of next-auth do not support the app folder which we are using in this tutorial. So make sure you install next-auth at latest @prisma/client and @next/out/Prisma adapter, like that. I'm just gonna collapse so you can see this in one line. So @next-out/Prisma adapter and bcrypt, and just press enter. Wait a couple of seconds for this to install. And then go ahead and run one more command, npm install -D @types/bcrypt, like that, because the bcrypt package by default does not have those types. And you can go ahead and npm run dev your project now. Great. And you can just refresh your local host to confirm that everything is working, but we're not going to use localhost for now yet. So what I want you to do now is I want you to open your sidebar like this. I'm going to expand a bit. I want you to go into the app folder and create a new folder called libs. And inside of there, you're going to create a new file called prismadb.ts. Great. Inside of that file, you're going to import Prisma client from @prisma/client, a package which we just installed. And then you're going to write const client is equal to global this.prisma pipe new Prisma client, like this. And we do get an error here because Prisma by default does not exist in global this, but we're going to fix that in a minute with some types. And just below that, you're going to write an if clause. So if process.environment.node environment is not equal to production, in that case, we're going to assign global this.prisma to be equal to client, like that. Great. So I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see this in one line, like this. All right. And below that, make sure you write export default client, like this. And now let's go ahead and fix this global this.prisma error. So at the top of your file right here, write declare global var prisma is a type of Prisma client type undefined, like this. And the global this.prisma error should go away, and if you hover, you can see that it has this Prisma client type right here. Great. Next thing we have to do is we have to define our next out file. In order to do that, open your sidebar again. I'm going to collapse everything so it's easier. Go into your app folder, into API, and in here you already have a hello folder, and you can go ahead and delete that one because we are not going to need it, but make sure you keep the API folder. And inside, create a new folder called app, like that. And inside out folder, you're going to create a new folder, and you're gonna name it in these square brackets, and you're gonna spread next out, like that, and just name the folder like that. And inside these square brackets, where you write ... next out, create a new file called route.ts. So you should have an app folder, API folder, out folder, and a square brackets where you spread the next out, like that. And go into route.ts inside of that folder. And in here, let's import some packages. So import bcrypt from bcrypt. Again, if this shows an error for you saying that the types do not exist, make sure you have run npm install D bcrypt types, which we did just a moment ago. Then run import next out, comma, open an object and the structure out options from next-out, like this. Below that, import credentials provider from next-out / providers / credentials, like that. We're also going to need a GitHub provider from next-out / providers / GitHub. And we're going to need a Google provider from next-out / providers / Google, like that. And in the end, we're also going to need our Prisma adapter from next-out / Prisma - adapter, which we also installed alongside bcrypt next out. Great. And now we have to import our newly created lib prismadb right here. So go ahead and write import prisma from @/app/libs /prismadb, like that. Again, if the @ is not working for you for any reason, you can always use the good old ... abbreviation, so ... and just find PrismaDB manually like this, but I'm going to use this @ sign right here because it looks cleaner. All right, and now I'm going to define my out options. So make sure you write export const out options like that. The export is very important because we're going to need out options to create a server session later in the tutorial. So out options is going to be a type of out options which we imported from nextout right here. That is an object, so go ahead and write adapter, Prisma adapter, and inside of that you're going to put Prisma, which you have imported from here, our newly created library, which returns the client like this. Great. Below the adapter, you're going to create a new property, providers, which is a type of array which accepts many providers we have. First one is going to be GitHub provider. Open an object inside its function and write client ID process.environment.github_ID as a string like that. And below that, you're also going to have client secret. And instead of GitHub ID, it's going to be GitHub_secret. So we don't have this in our environment file yet, but we are going to create them later. Great. And then you can do the same thing for Google provider now. So again, open an object inside of its parentheses and write client ID is equal to process.environment.google_client_ID as a string. And below that, client secret process.environment.google.client.secret as a string as well. Great. Make sure you don't misspell secret as something else. That happens often. So just make sure it's Google_client_secret like that. Great. And below this, we're going to need our credentials provider. So our credentials provider is the basic login functionality using email and password. So if user doesn't want to use Google or GitHub and they want to use email and password, this is where we are going to handle that. So first we have to give it a name, and the name is simply going to be credentials like that. Below that, we have an actual object called credentials. Open it and write some fields. So first field is going to be email. It's going to have a label of email, and it's going to have a type of text like that. And below that, write a field called password, which is going to have a label of password and a type of password as well. Great. Below credentials, we're going to have our authorize function, in which we're going to compare what user has written as his password and compare that to the database to see whether we can log in the user or not. So go ahead and write asynchronous authorize, which accepts the credentials. Open this object, and first thing you're going to do is check if the email and password has been passed from the form. So if there is no credentials, question mark dot email, or if there is no credentials, question mark dot password, in that case just throw new error invalid credentials like that. If that is okay, in that case we can continue with searching for our user. So go ahead and write const user is equal await prisma dot user. You should get an autocomplete for the user if you run npx prisma db push. So go ahead and write prisma.user dot find unique, and we're going to use the where attribute here, and we're going to find the user by the unique ID. So email credentials dot email like that. Great. And now we're going to check if this user actually exists. So if there is no user, or if user does not have hashed password, we're going to throw new error, again, invalid credentials. So what is the case that this could happen? Well, what could happen is that we have passed the email and we have passed the password in this sign up form, but the email we passed does not exist in our database. That means that the user will not be found. And how come hash password cannot exist? Well, that means that the user has registered using Google or GitHub, so it has not set up an explicit password. And we cannot use the sign up form with email and password to log in that user. The only users we are going to be able to log in using the credentials providers are the one who registered using name, email, and password here and not used Google or GitHub. So that's why we have to do these checks. Great. What we have to do now is check if user entered the correct password. So go ahead and write const is correct password is equal to await bcrypt.compare. In the first argument, you're going to pass credentials.password, and in the second one, you're going to pass user.hashedpassword like that. So we're going to compare what the form user has submitted with what we have hashed in the database, like that. Perfect. And then we're going to check if the password is not correct. So if exclamation point is correct password, in that case, we're going to throw new error, invalid credentials again. And just make sure you put await before bcrypt.compare, otherwise this is not going to be a boolean, it's going to be a promise. So just make sure you put await in front of bcrypt.compare like that. Perfect. And in the end, all we have to do is return user. So if all of these checks have passed, if there is an existing user, if it does have a hashed password, and if the password is correct, all we have to do is return the user. Great. And now, outside of this providers object right here, so just below this array, you're going to write a property called debug, which is going to be very useful if you're in development. So go ahead and write process.environment.node_environment is identical to development. So only in development, we're going to turn on debug mode. So in your terminal, you're going to see a bunch of useful information for your authentication state. Then let's define our session. So our session is going to have a strategy of JVT like that. And what we have to do in the end is write a secret. So go ahead and write the property secret, which is a type of process.environment.nextOut_secret like that. Great. And now that we have completed our auth options here, we can go below right here and just write const handler is equal next out options like that. So where do we get this next out form? Well, we imported it here at the beginning, and out options is the object we just created right here. So just make sure you don't accidentally pass this type out options. That is not the same thing and you're gonna get an error. Make sure you actually pass this object with lowercase a at the beginning. And to wrap this up, all you have to do is go to the bottom and write export handler as get and handler as post like that. In previous versions of Nextout, you did not have to do this step, but since we are using the new route handlers inside the app folder, this is how it's done in the documentation. Great job. Just make sure you save this file, and let's just confirm you have this in your app folder, in the API folder, inside out folder, inside this square brackets ... next out folder right here. Great job. So let's continue with our tutorial, and first thing we have to do is we actually have to assign this next auth secret, GitHub ID, GitHub secret, Google Client ID, and Google Client secret environment variables. So let's just go into our .environment file to prepare those. So just below this database URL, I'm gonna add next auth _secret like this, and I'm gonna name it next auth secret. You can put anything you want in here like that. Now, one thing I want to mention, make sure you don't misspell this. A lot of people misspell like next out. Make sure it's next out. They also misspell secret with set like this. So just make sure it's secret like this. If you're not sure, you can just copy and paste what you've written here. So if you've defined process.environment.nextOut secret, you can copy this and make sure you paste it as a name right here. And I'm going to do the same thing for GitHub ID and GitHub secret. For now, I'm just going to leave them empty. So go ahead and copy GitHub secret, leave that empty as well. And the same thing for Google Client ID and Google Client secret. We are going to add them a bit later. Great. After you've added this, that is enough for us to do the registration part. So what I want you to do next is I'm going to collapse everything here, and I'm going to go into my app folder, into API. And inside API, I'm going to create a new folder called register, like that. So just make sure you don't accidentally put this in the out folder, because out folder is reserved for next out actions. This register is not exactly connected to our next out. We're not using it in that way. So just make sure that your register folder is in the root of the API folder like that. And inside, create a new file, route.ts like that. Go ahead and import bcrypt from bcrypt like that, and just go ahead and import prisma from /app/libs/prisma-db, and also import next response from next/server like that. And now you can go ahead and write export asynchronous function post and open the parentheses. And the first argument is going to take is request, which is a type of request. You don't have to import this type from anywhere. It is native in Next environment. Great. Now we're going to extract our body. So write const body is equal to await request.json like that. And then you can extract all of those values which we need for registration, and that is email, name, and password from body like that. And then you can just write an if clause. So if there is no email, or if there is no name, or if there is no password, and you can just run return new next response. You can just write missing info and an object with status 400 like that. Great. And just below that, we're going to create our hashed password, which we are going to store in the database, because we never store plain text passwords in the database. We have to encrypt them. So go ahead and write const hashed password is equal to await bcrypt.hash. First argument is password, and the second argument takes the number 12 as options. And then just define the user. So const user is equal to await prisma.user.create, open an object and write data. And the data it will accept is email, name, and hashed password, just like that. And in the end, just write return next response.json user like that. Great. And if you want to protect this route from any internal errors, you can wrap all of this in a try and catch function if you want to. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to write this entire thing inside a try catch like this. And then here I'm going to catch the error, which is type of any. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to console log the error, and I'm going to map that under registration error. You don't have to do this, but it's very helpful when debugging your application that you have these errors in the terminal, so you can just find registration error, and then you know, okay, the error is in this route right here. And what you want to do is just return new next response internal error with a status of 500 like that. Perfect. So why do we have to explicitly say new next response when we are throwing errors, but we don't have to when we're sending our user? Well, that's because we use this .json, which does not require the new indicator before it. Great job. All right, and now we're going to go back into our auth form now that we have this register route right here. So I'm going to go into app, into site, components, auth form right here, and in our onSubmit function, right here where we wrote the command axios register, we're actually going to write our axios call. Before we continue, we actually have to install axios. So I'm going to shut down the application and write npm install axios like that. Great. Now that it has been installed, you can go ahead and run npm run dev again, and just make sure you refresh your localhost so everything is up to date. Great. And now you can remove this axios register comment right here, and you can actually write axios, which you can import right here. Import axios from axios. I'm going to put it at the top so you can see clearly. So make sure you do this import axios from axios at the top, and then you can use axios.post, and you can target /API/register, and you can pass in the data right here. So this data is going to consist of name, email, and password, right? And in our route, you can see we check for email, name, and password, which are those exact values. And the reason we know it's /API/register is because that's what we named it in our API folder. In our register folder, we have a route. So that's why it's mapped to /API/register like that. Great. And for now, you can just save it like this. Refresh your page one more time. I'm going to prepare my MongoDB right here so we can see if the new user has been created successfully. So right now I have no users in my database, and I'm also gonna open my network tab so I can clearly see if something goes wrong. I'm gonna click create an account, so I'm looking at the register variant, and I'm gonna name myself Antonio with an email antonio@mail.com and the password of 123321, and I'm gonna click register. And you can see we pointed at the register route right here, and we get a success message of 200, and you can see that it returned our newly created user. Great. Now let's go back in the MongoDB and see if the user has been created, and there we go. We have a name of Antonio, email of Antonio, and a hashed password right here. What I showed you in the network was my payload. The preview is what was created. You can see that we have an empty array of conversation IDs created at hashed password ID, image, name, seen messages, and updated at. Great job. All right. So now I want to add some feedback depending on whether we, for example, don't send name or email, so we can actually see the errors coming from the server in our application. And we're also going to complete signing in, because right now we only have the register functionality, and we're also going to complete this disabled state turning off after some time. So go ahead and refresh your localhost for now so everything is clear. And first thing I want you to do is I want you to go into your terminal right here. You can shut down the application for now and go ahead and run npm install react-hot-toast like that. Great. After this has been installed, I want you to go, I'm going to close everything here, go into your app folder and create a new folder called context. Inside this context, I want you to create a new file called toaster context.tsx like that. Great. I want to start by defining use client at the top, and then just write import toaster from react-hot-toast like that. And all you're going to do is write const toaster context, return an arrow function, and just return toaster, which is a self-closing tag like this, and make sure you export default toaster context like this. Great. And now you can go back in your layout.tsx right here in the app folder, and you're gonna just collapse this body right here, and you're gonna wrap, actually not gonna wrap children anything, but you're just gonna write toaster context like this, which is a self-closing tab as well, and you can import toaster context from /context/context toaster context like that. Great. And I'm just gonna separate these imports like that. Beautiful. And now we have the toaster context, which we can use to trigger our toasts. Great. Now I want you to go back in your site components out form right here. And what I want you to do is I want you to write a .catch function. And what you're going to do here is just trigger an arrow function, which is going to call toast, which can import from React hot toast. So that has been done here. So import destructive toast from destructed. So make sure you write it in an object like this. And then you can use toast.error, something went wrong like that. Great. And yeah, make sure you run your application after you install the package. So npm run dev in the terminal and just refresh your localhost. Great. And now I'm going to click create an account again. And I'm going to click register. And you can see that I get back an error, something went wrong. Why do we get that error? When you can check that in your network tab right here on the side. If you click on network, I'm just going to refresh one more time. I'm going to click create an account and I'm going to click register, and you can see that because we have not sent email name and password, we get back an error, and you can see how that little toast notification came up at the top. Great. I'm going to close the terminal like this, but I'm going to keep the app running. And to prevent this from always being disabled, I'm just going to write a .finally here, in which I'm just going to write set is loading to false like that. So now if you refresh one more time and go into create an account right here, and even if you get an error, you can see we get an error, but we can click again and we can try again. Great, beautiful. And I'm just going to test what happens if we enter a correct one. So I'm going to write markmail.com 123321, and I'm going to register. And you can see in this case we get no error, and we also stop loading because the user has been successfully created. I can refresh the user one more time here in the database, and you're going to see that I have Antonio and I have Mark here. Great. And now let's actually implement login here. So in order to implement login, we're going to need to use nextAuth sign in function. So I'm just going to write sign in here, which we will have to import from a nextAuth. So just go to the top right here and write import sign in from next-auth/react like this. So make sure you import sign in from next-auth/react. Great. And now we can go back here in the variant login, and what we will send for login. Well, first we have to define how are we logging in. We have to choose a provider. And if you remember, we have 3 providers in our nextAuth file. So I'm just going to quickly open that for context. So inside of my nextAuth file, I have GitHub provider, Google provider, and credentials provider. For this exact thing we are doing right now, we want to use the credentials provider. So we have to use this name that we've given it right here, credentials. So back in my auth form, in the first parameter, I'm going to write credentials just like that. And the data I'm going to pass in is going to be spread this existing data that we also send in the register. But the reason I'm spreading it is because I'm also going to add another argument, redirect, and just set it to false like that. Great. And now I'm going to use .then and open an arrow function inside. And in this .then, I'm going to have a callback. And first I'm going to check if there is an error during login. So if there is a callback (error), in that case, I just want to return a toast. So I'm going to write toast.error, invalid credentials, like that. And if callback (OK), in that case, I'm just going to, for now, I'm just going to say toast.info success. Actually, .info does not exist. I wanted to say .success, like this. Or you can just write logged in, like that. Beautiful. Great. I'm going to refresh my application here, and I'm going to try and log in as something that does not exist. So I'm going to try wrong, mail.com, and password. I'm going to click sign in. And as you can see, okay, I got both of them. So there is obviously a mistake. I'm going to fix that in just a second. And we also have to disable. But what's important is that we got this invalid credentials as well. All right, so to fix this, all you have to do, besides checking of K, you also have to check if there is no callback error like this. And then the logged in will not show. So if I try this one more time, and before I try, just below this .then, I'm also going to add .finally right here, which is just going to return an arrow function and set is loading to false like we did in the register right now. And you can refresh just to make sure it's all reflected. And I'm going to test again. So wrong, and I'm going to click sign in. And you can see I get invalid credentials like that. But if I try my existing account, you can see that I get logged in. Perfect. Great, great job. Alright, now we have to set up our GitHub and Google social login. So first, I'm going to collapse everything, and the only thing we have to change for now is just set up this GitHub ID and Google Client ID variables. So first let's do GitHub because it's much simpler than Google. And I just logged in my GitHub. I realized I was not logged in. So just make sure you're in your GitHub, you're logged in, and go into your settings. I'm going to zoom everything in just a little bit so you can see. So in my settings, I'm going to go all the way down and click developer settings right here. And I'm going to click on OAuth apps. You see I have a couple of them. Just click on new OAuth app right here. I'm going to name this Messenger Video. Now, the homepage URL is going to be your localhost 3000. So you can just copy this and make sure it includes the HTTP protocol. Make sure it's not HTTPS because we are working with HTTP. Great. And with the authorization callback URL, make sure you do the exact same thing and you can leave everything else as it is. And just click register application. Great. Now go ahead and copy this client ID and paste it here and click generate a new secret to get the client secret. And then you're going to have this little message here and you can just click copy in this green box and make sure you paste the GitHub secret here as well. Great. Now I'm going to go back into my Messenger clone right here. I'm going to go back into Outform and I'm going to go right here in the social action. And one thing we have to do in this social action is the same thing we did with login. So what I'm going to do is, after set is loading, I'm going to call sign in, and instead of passing credentials like I did here, I'm going to pass either Google or GitHub, because that's what we do right here. So we call the social action with either Google or GitHub here. So that's why we know those are the only two options we can get. So I'm going to pass in the action right here, and an object I'm going to pass is not data because we're not using email and password here. All I have to do is write redirect false in the social action. And in the .then, again, I'm going to get a callback right here and just do the exact same thing. So if there is a callback question mark error, in that case, you can just run toast that error, invalid credentials. And if there is a callback, okay. And if there is no callback question mark error, in that case, you can just run toast that success logged in, like that. Perfect. And just make sure you add .finally here and just run set is loading to false, like that. Perfect. And now I'm just going to refresh everything here, and I'm going to go and try and click on my GitHub right here to see what happens. And you can see I'm in the authorization screen. I'm going to click authorize my account, and in a few seconds you can see that I'm back here. So now we can check if this worked correctly by going to our database and clicking refresh on the user and see if a third user has been created. Okay, no user for now, but let's check if it's an account. Yes, so an account is here. That means it's working. But why is there no user being created? Well, that happens when we work with both credentials and social login. So what I advise you to do is to remove all of your users, like I'm doing right now. If you have the same problem happening, because a lot of people have that, go into your account and remove all the accounts as well, like this. And what I suggest you do is you open your terminal, open your sidebar like this, inspect element, and just do an empty cache and reload on this application to make sure you're not logged in, and just press on GitHub again. Alright, so this time I did not have an authorization screen because I already allowed it, but let's refresh to see if we successfully created an account this time. Alright, so we have an account, let's check it for our user, and we have our user. Great, so that fixes it. When you create social login, make sure you remove all of your users and all of your accounts and just clear cache. Perhaps you don't have to clear cache, but I just want to make sure that everything is working for you. So then try again, and this time you will not have the authorization screen. Perhaps your screen will just hang a little bit. It will look like nothing is happening, but it's actually creating the user in the background. And you can just check your account and user again. You can see that I have a user which uses my Gmail account, and it has an image with GitHub user content inside. Perfect. And now we just have to do the Google login. All right, so for Google, let's go into Google and let's just write Google Cloud Console like this. And make sure you select this Google Cloud Platform link. For me, it's the second one after this sponsored one. So just make sure it's called Google Cloud Platform like this. So the link is console.cloud.google.com. And in here, you can see I have Airbnb clone from my previous tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here. I'm going to click create a new project. My new project is going to be called Messenger-Video. The organization does not matter. So I'm just going to click create. And just wait a couple of seconds that this create project finishes. Great, after it has finished, you can just click select project right here and make sure you're in the Messenger video right here at the top. And then you can just write in API here and just click on APIs and services right here. And the first thing we're going to have to create is an OAuth consent screen. So in this sidebar, make sure you click OAuth consent screen right here. Wait for a couple of seconds to load, and make sure you select external, so it's available to anyone with a Google account, and click create. I'm just going to collapse this. For the app name, it's going to be called Messenger-Video. For the user support email, just select your email. It's going to autofill it for you. You can leave all of this empty, including the authorized domains, and in the email address, just write your email one more time. And just press save and continue. You can leave this exactly as it is and just press save and continue again, and one more time save and continue, and that is it. And then you can go into your credentials right here in the sidebar, and in the top you can click create credentials, OAuth client ID, like this. For the application type, select web application. Name you can leave as web client 1. You can leave the authorized JavaScript origins empty for now, and just click add URI for authorized redirect URIs. And what you're going to write is going to be similar to GitHub, but a bit more complicated. So HTTP localhost 3000/API/auth/callback/Google. So I'm just going to zoom in so you can see what I've written here. So it's localhost 3000/API/auth/callback/Google, like that, and just press create. Great, and now we have our client ID and client secret. So let's go back into our .environment file right here. Let's copy client ID and paste it here, and let's copy client secret and paste it here as well. Great, and now we can go back into our Messenger clone right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove again all of my accounts. Actually, I'm going to do that individually like this. So I'm going to delete my user first right here, then I'm going to go into an account, and I'm going to remove my account right here. Great, and now I'm going to refresh this one more time, and I'm going to use the empty cache and hard reload. And I am going to click on Google this time, and you can see it prompts me to select my account. I'm going to click on the first one. I'm going to wait a couple of seconds. Okay, we are back to this screen, and let's see if I refresh my accounts right here, if Google account has been created this time. And there we go, we have a Google account created in our database, and if I go and check my users, you can see that the user is here as well. Great. If you try GitHub, perhaps it will not work now, and that is either because you're logged in at the moment. So if you are logged in, since we did not create a redirect from this screen at this point in the tutorial, it will probably cause some problems if you try to social log in while you're logged in as another user. The other problem you could have is that your GitHub and Google share the same email. So make sure that your credential login, your Google login, and your GitHub login all have a different email. Great. You completely finished the authentication screen, and in the next part of the tutorial, we're going to work on redirecting to our actual Messenger screen where we will load our users, and we're also going to wrap the entire application in a session provider so you can actually trigger logout as well and actually see what user you're logged in as. So we're going to continue now, and we're going to create redirection after successful login or register to our /users screen, or so-called the actual Messenger view. In order to do that, first we have to add authentication context to the root of our application. So let's close everything up and let's go back into our app, into context folder right here, where we already have the toaster context, and create a new file called auth-context.ts inside. Great. Just make sure it's .tsx instead of ts. So auth-context.tsx is the new file inside the context folder. And first let's define use client at the top, and then let's just import session provider from next-out/react, just like that. And then let's create our interface. So interface auth context props children react.react node, like that. And then let's just export default function auth context children, and let's just assign these props right here. So auth context props, like that. And inside, all you're going to do is return session provider, and inside of there, you're going to write children, and you're going to close the session provider just like that. Perfect. And that's it for our auth context. So make sure you import session provider from next-auth/react. Make sure you've written these props, which only accept children. Make sure you have signed those props, and just create this session provider, which accepts children in the middle. Great. And now let's go back into our app layout.tsx file right here. And what you're going to do is you're going to wrap the toaster context and children inside auth context. So go ahead and write auth context like this, and just wrap toaster context and children inside, and you can kind of indent them a little bit. And you can import auth context from ./context/auth context the same way you did with toaster context. Great. And now you can go back into